Hey everyone, today I want to cover some of the modifications I did to my Toro 1432 commercial snowblower. I've had quite a few people ask about these modifications, and I also did a few more after the most recent storm just to tweak things a little bit. First thing I did when I first initially got it was I added this hour meter on. I think a machine this size, especially commercial, should have an hour meter on it just to keep an idea for maintenance purposes how much you're actually using it. Obviously I got this aftermarket. Unfortunately they don't come with them stock, but relatively simple basic thing you can get online, not too hard, and the install is relatively easy. Basically all you're doing is wrapping the wire around the spark plug cable so it can know when the engine's running, and this one also happens to have a tack on it as well. So I just real cleanly ran it up in the wire loom, screwed it into the top of the housing, and put a little hole for the wire itself. Now it's nice and secure on here. It almost has an OEM look to it, and now when I'm using it, I can cycle between the tack and the engine hours just so I can know, like I said, maintenance. When it's time to do the oil changes, I know about how many hours I've put on it. So real simple basic modification anybody can do that you should definitely have on a machine that is going to see a lot of use. Next thing I did, this one I've gotten quite a few questions about. I modified the height of this headlight. From the factory, it does not have this 4-inch steel square tube on here. This sits down here. The problem I found when I first started using it is the light sits so low that it creates a shadow in front of the housing, and because it's a snowblower and you're typically going very slow when you're using it, you don't need to see really far in front of you, but you want to see right in front of the housing just to make sure you're not ingesting anything into the housing and the auger and the impeller that you're not supposed to. So you really want to be able to have a good eye on what's actually going into the machine itself. This is another simple modification. Went down to the local home improvement store. I got a piece of 1-inch steel square tubing. I cut it to length, this 4-inch piece. I painted it black, and I also had to get a slightly longer carriage bolt that I just cut to length, and it is definitely much more effective sitting up high like this. I was initially a little bit worried that I might have a wobble sitting higher away from the mount, but it doesn't. It's really solid. It helps eliminate that shadow, and 4 inches was the furthest I was willing to go comfortably because it still sits below the gas tank, and I did not have to modify the wiring at all. It does not rub. I didn't have to cut anything, splice anything, so the OEM wiring harness is still completely intact. I could easily set it back to the stock position, and I didn't have to modify anything, and it was a relatively cheap and simple project. Now, most recently, after that big storm I just had, I did the video of doing a run test of this thing. The drift cutters that the commercial units come with, they have standard hex bolts on them with nylon lockers, so they do require a tool to take the drift cutters and put them up and down. Problem is, if you're really far away where you're working and you're far away from your tools or your house or whatever, and you want to put the drift cutters up, you can't do it by hand. It's impossible. The bolts are way too tight. You're going to need a wrench to bring them up. So I just went over to the local home improvement store. Really, any hardware store or home improvement store should have these basic wing knobs. These are called. They're 5/16 with an 18 gauge thread pitch, so it's a real super common size. Real simple. It's an in-stock item. It's something that's not hard to get if you want to break them or need to get more. And now I can easily turn these by hand. So if I'm far away from the house and I want to decide I want to use the drift cutters, I don't have to run back and get a wrench now. I can easily turn these things, put the drift cutters up, put them down when I'm done, and I can put enough leverage on them where they're not going to move or rattle loose while I'm using the unit itself. But again, 5/16 by 18 if you want to modify this to yours, so you don't require a tool anymore to put your drift cutters up and down. And then most recently, I noted after the last video I did with the big storm, the first gear was a little bit too tall for going through really deep stuff. When I was going through 16 to 18 inches of snow, a little bit faster than I wanted it to go. After I started really looking into it, this was a simple fix. On the bottom here, you have this basically pin you have to pull out here. When you pull this out, you can bring this rod down, and this upper piece on this drive rod here is threaded. So if you turn it clockwise, you will basically shorten the length of this rod, and it will basically slow the transmission down a little bit. And every time you turn it, it slows it down a little bit more. I did a total of 3 turns to slow it down, so it comes out, like I said, real simple. drop the pin. This comes out clockwise to shorten it, which will slow every gear down. Put it back in place, put the pin in, and now each gear is a little bit slower. So now essentially first gear is a super, super slow crawl gear. And every gear after that as a whole is a little bit slower now. Now that's fine. I basically only lost a little bit of top end speed in 6th gear. That's fine. 6th gear is really for transportation purposes only. You're not really going to be clearing snow in 6th gear because it's just so fast. So now my lower gears are a little bit slower, which is exactly what I wanted so when I'm using that for clearing snow. And the upper gears, it's only a tiny bit slower. I really didn't even notice it's that much slower, but now I have that super, super low crawl gear I was looking for. It was a simple fix. I didn't have to modify anything, and I was able to just do it in a couple minutes here in the garage. And finally, to address the what I thought was quite a bit of spring tension on the transmission engagement here, I just very carefully bent this down a little bit, this coil spring, just to lower the tension, because after a couple hours of using this thing, the tension was a little bit much, and it started to make my hand a little bit numb being on it for about 2 hours the other day. Just a tiny bit. I didn't want to lose too much. I wanted to still have a good strong spring there, so in an emergency, it still backs off instantaneously, and it's just a little bit less pressure on my hand when I'm using it for extended periods of time. So those are the modifications I did to the machine. I think that's pretty much going to do it for all the modifications I'm going to do. They're basically just real simple things I was able to just do myself in my garage. Not expensive, improves the machine a little bit in the areas I felt it could use a little bit of tweaking. So hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.